Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Peniel, and I'm the Policy Engagement Coordinator here at AFSC's Policy Office in DC. It is slightly gloomy outside. We did get a little bit of sun and tons of wind here today. So just say hi in the comments. Let us know your name, where you're calling us from, and what kind of weather you are braving today. Thank you, and we'll go ahead and start shortly. Just let a couple more people join in so that they get all the information that we'll be sharing today. Just give it one more minute. Like I said, please let us know where you're joining us from the chat today, what kind of weather you're braving, and we'll get started. All right, let's go ahead. Hi, everyone, again. Peniel here, calling out of DC. Joining you today to share some updates around the DACA program, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or Dreamers, as they colloquially called. We've had some recent changes to the program, and so we just wanted to share that update with you, open up the space for some questions that you might have and some clarifications that you might need. So we hope that this will be informative, and as usual, when you have questions, as the questions arise while I'm speaking, feel free to pop them in the chat, and I'll try to get to them either through my presentation or right afterwards. Thank you. So, like I said, we're here today to just briefly give an update on the DACA program. Essentially, what's happened is that on July 16th, which was last week Friday, a federal judge in Texas ruled that DACA, or deemed that DACA, in that judge's opinion, that DACA was unlawful. Dealing yet another blow to this program that many have fought to defend at multiple levels, a program that protects hundreds of thousands of people from deportation. In particular, this program was created during the Obama administration to protect these individuals from deportation. The individuals covered here are upwards of 700,000 immigrants who came into the United States as children. And so this decision that DACA was quote unquote unlawful was not taken lightly, and really just wanting to take a moment to stand in solidarity with DACA recipients who have had to live through this cycle of attacks and just being in limbo oftentimes because of, while the program offers protection, it is precarious, they're temporary, and every so often we have to contend with this reality. So standing in solidarity with DACA recipients across the country, who are just trudging on through whatever they're doing in life, but having to deal with information like this. And we hope that we can help clarify any concerns that they have. And if you are an ally, an advocate, a family member of a DACA recipient, we hope that this information helps you also support the DACA recipients in your life and in your community as well. So what kind of a decision are we talking about? The court case in question was called Texas v. United States, and it arose out of a multi-state challenge to the legality of DACA. Unfortunately, when DACA was created, and a few years after, the Attorney General of Texas led about 7 other state attorney generals to challenge the legality of DACA. And the judge who ruled on this was federal judge Andrew Hanen. Looking at DACA, said that it was unlawful in the way that it was created, and that President Barack Obama, in his time, had exceeded his presidential authority when he created the program. You might be wondering, what happened in the Supreme Court then? I thought in the Supreme Court, we won the case about DACA. And I thought there was another judge again in December that issued a ruling on DACA. Yes, but as some of you might know, the US's system is very complicated, and on one issue, multiple court cases can be ongoing. And so, while some court cases, in particular the one that went up to the Supreme Court, was challenging the termination of DACA, it was not challenging the lawfulness of DACA. The argument there was the way the Trump administration then terminated DACA, was that lawful or not? That is what the Supreme Court ruled on. And the court in New York that ruled last year was also addressing that issue. Neither of these courts actually addressed whether DACA was created in what you would call a lawful manner, like if the president had the right to create a program like DACA. That was not what they were discussing. This is what Judge Hayden, however, had on his desk and had to issue a decision on. And so, in his saying that he didn't feel DACA was created properly, and that DHS or President Biden has to revisit this program and figure out how to create it in a quote unquote proper manner, he decided that he was going to end DACA for new recipients. And so what that means is new DACA recipients or people who could potentially be DACA recipients who do not have a DACA permit physically or have an approval do not have access to the program at the moment. So just to clarify again, a ruling issues has said that DACA cannot continue as is. And so that means new folks will not be accepted into the program. And they're trying to figure out now what happens with folks who were already in the program. What the judge said was that he is not directing any enforcement actions against DACA recipients, current DACA recipients. So if you have a DACA recipient in your life, you have a DACA recipient as a family member, colleague, community member, currently, if they have their DACA permit, they are still protected. They can still work. They can still go about their lives. They are protected from deportation and detention. They can also continue to apply for the renewal of their status. As some of you might know, the DACA permit lasts for 2 years. And so when you're approaching the end of your status, about 150 days to the end of your expiration date, you can apply for a renewal. And so the judge has said they can go ahead and continue to apply for their renewals for now, while we, the courts and the Biden administration, figure out what's next. However, it did say that if you were a DACA recipient and you had your permit expire and it has gone over a year, if you did all of a sudden decide to apply for a renewal, it will be considered as a first-time application and it will not be processed. So I think that's something you want to remind DACA recipients in your lives who might have been waiting for some time to renew their application, and it's slowly approaching the 1-year mark since the expiration date on their card. We are encouraging people to please renew their application as they are able, because if it passes the 1-year mark, DHS and USCIS will not accept their application, because it would then sort of it will start the clock anew on them, and they will be addressed as first-time applicants. So that's important to note. What does this mean for new DACA applicants? In December, like I said, a New York judge ruled that since the Trump administration's ending of DACA was unlawful, as determined by the Supreme Court, they should reinstate DACA into its maximum capacity as it was intended by the Obama administration. And so that meant DACA recipients could work for 2 years, were protected from deportation for the 2-year duration of their permit. And they were also able to access a benefit that allowed them travel outside the country for educational, employment, or humanitarian reasons. Well, when that decision was issued, there was excitement across the camp, because so many undocumented immigrant youth and young people had been awaiting the opportunity to apply, and we saw people start applying. Well, between then and now, we've had about 81,000 plus new DACA applicants who have expressed intent to apply, have submitted their applications. Unfortunately, this current court decision that we just received stops DHS and USCIS from processing their applications. And so for the 81,000 plus people who have their applications currently pending, DHS cannot process their applications. Essentially, the decision from the courts was pen down. You shall not take any more actions. You shall do nothing until we we go through a conversation with all the parties and the stakeholders and decide the next steps. So while DHS can accept your application, if you sent it in, it will be delivered. They will not process it. And that means they will not schedule you for biometrics. They will not ask you for evidentiary information. They will not call you in for a secondary interview should they need to. They will do nothing about it. Your application will essentially just sit in a desk. In fact, as of, I think, Sunday, DHS actually sent out a text message to every DACA recipient who had applied for either a renewal or for a new application saying that there will be no more biometric appointments scheduled for new DACA applicants. And those that were scheduled had their biometric appointments canceled. So if you have not received any card in the mail saying you are officially a DACA recipient, or if you have not been approved and you need evidence to have said your application has been approved, await next steps, by Friday, which was when the decision was dropped, there will be no action taken on your application for the time being. USCIS has promised to follow up with more information on what this means and what the next steps will be. However, if you were a first-time applicant, but by some stroke of events, the way you applied for your DACA application, it was processed quickly enough and you actually have received a DACA permit or you have been approved, you continue to access the benefits of DACA as if you applied for DACA and received it last year, because automatically you are now a DACA recipient and will be addressed as such when decisions occur. So it's important to remember the distinction between what happens to all DACA recipients and potential DACA recipients, as we will address them. If you remember, I mentioned another benefit in DACA, aside from the work permits and the protection from detention and deportation, is access to advanced parole. Advanced parole is a benefit that allows DACA recipients to travel outside of the U.S. for educational, employment, or humanitarian reasons. USCIS stated in a memo that was sent out on Sunday that current DACA recipients can still apply for advanced parole. Individuals who have traveled outside of the U.S. on advanced parole currently can still return, and those who were recently granted advanced parole but haven't traveled can still do so. So for current DACA recipients, access to advanced parole is business as usual. It is important to note that we do not know when things will change. We do not know when the judge will close off every other piece of DACA. And so we're encouraging people, like I said, please renew if you are able. Consult a legal service provider that you trust and is accredited for how this decision affects you. It's important to note that while you can get your information from advocates like me and from the media, your best bet is if you consult a legal service provider that can answer these questions. And we'll put in the chat now a very, very helpful guidance from our partners at United We Dream for DACA recipients and legal practitioners. A bunch of questions are answered there that can help guide you on your next steps in this issue. For folks, I just wanted to quickly revisit the journey of DACA thus far, right? Here's a brief and by no means comprehensive timeline. In June 2012, DACA was created by President Obama through an executive action, following years of organizing by undocumented immigrant youth, their families, and allies. And so it's important to note that every win that has been secured for immigrant community members, it was secured by immigrant community members themselves. DACA was not a gift. DACA was born from organizing and from us making demands from our community, from our elected officials. Unfortunately, in September 2017, the Trump administration announced that it will terminate DACA, jeopardizing the futures of hundreds of thousands of DACA recipients, undocumented young immigrants, and their families. In June 2020, in a 5-4 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration's attempt to end DACA was arbitrary and capricious and was in violation of the federal law. The ruling then preserved DACA status for recipients, allowing them to continue to live and work in the United States without being targeted for detention and deportation. However, as I said earlier, the Supreme Court's decision was narrow because they were only talking about whether DACA was ended lawfully or unlawfully. They were not talking about the legality of the program and the viability of the program. And thus, that left the door open for the Trump administration to attempt to terminate DACA again through what they thought was another legal rationale. And so, just as we learn through this, it's important to note that DACA has always been the floor and not the ceiling, because at every stage and ever so often, DACA is once again challenged, is once again vulnerable, and it's more than just a program. It's the lives of almost 800,000 people who are affected every time a decision like this comes out. In July 2020, the Trump administration then issued a memo that worked to dismantle the program. Amongst other things, it refused to accept new applications, and it also tried to limit the renewal periods for existing recipients then. In December 2020, thankfully, a federal judge in New York ordered the US government to fully restore the program, reversing the memo that the Trump administration had issued. So since December 2020, the US government reopened DACA program to first-time applicants, allowing, like I said, the estimated 81,000 plus people to apply. It also returned the renewal period for DACA recipients to 2 years and reinstated advanced parole. And thus, many DACA recipients have been able to access that opportunity to travel out of the United States for multiple reasons, including to visit family, for educational purposes, and other reasons. But like the Supreme Court decision, again, this decision was also narrow. It was only talking about how DACA was ended and should it be reinstated. So the struggle to save DACA is far from over, right? Within the program itself, the Biden administration could still seek to appeal this decision from from the courts in Texas. Excuse me. And DHS has announced that while it would comply with the court order and not approve new applications, it also stated in the memo that it would continue to implement the components of DACA that remain in place and work on establishing and publishing a notice of proposed rulemaking designed to strengthen and fortify DACA. And so whatever efforts that the Biden administration decides to move forward with in response to this, they have to contend with whatever the judge had said and reestablish DACA in a way that passes the scrutiny that the courts put on it. Ultimately, as we should know by now, and as we continue to mention, legislation, not litigation, can provide a permanent solution for DACA recipients and their families and other undocumented immigrants. Earlier this year, the Supreme Court issued a ruling on temporary protected status holders, saying that just because they accessed advanced parole and return into the United States does not mean their initial status before temporary protected status remains. And so more often than not, we are seeing court cases and litigation rulings that are reminding us that we need to look for permanent solutions for the almost 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. For years, hundreds of thousands of DACA recipients and their families have faced this uncertainty. While many have pledged support for DACA, both in Congress and in the administration, we are yet to see a permanent solution that creates the stability and peace of mind that our community members need. We know that it is a long time to pass legislation that keeps families and communities together. And so we're reminded that DACA is not the ceiling, it is the floor. It's a first step. TPS is not the ceiling, it is the floor. It is the first step. We want permanent protections and a roadmap to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented people in the United States. A roadmap that is timely, a roadmap that is clear, a roadmap that is inclusive of all, including those that might have had unfortunate interactions with the criminal legal system that we know to be racist and biased against Black and Brown community members. And so every day, as AFSC will continue to say, we are for citizenship for all, not some, not a specific category, for all. And what does this advocacy look like? As we continue to advocate, we hear that Congress is now considering a measure that could include a pathway to citizenship for hundreds of thousands of DACA recipients, people with temporary protected status, farm workers, essential workers, and their loved ones. This for us is a starting point because that does not cover the almost 11 million undocumented people. But we continue to support this ask because everybody that is able to be on a roadmap to citizenship and access permanent protections stabilizes our community more and allows people to thrive and continue to build their lives in places that they've called home. And so our elected officials need to hear from us today. You will see an action alert in the chat that reminds you to tell your member of Congress, now is the time to pass a roadmap to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. We cannot wait. This decision on DACA, the previous decision on TPS, the pandemic itself has shown that if we want to truly recover as a community, if we want to truly build back better from the pandemic, which, by the way, is still ongoing. So please wear your masks and get vaccinated if you can. We need to make sure that everyone in our community is protected, and that protection needs to be permanent and not precarious and not temporary. And that permanent protection is a roadmap to citizenship. So I'll pause now. I hope this was clear. Everything I have said, we also have on our website, and we'll include a link to our blog that was just recently updated with this information in case you want to refer back to it. But I will open up the floor now for any questions. Please put them in the chat so that I can try and address them to the best of my ability. I see no questions just yet. This means I did a good job of explaining things. I hope I did a good job, and I hope I did manage to confuse you more, hence the silence. But I'll give it one more minute. Oftentimes it takes a minute for the chat to load on my end for me to see your question. So if you have put a question in the chat, apologies. I promise I'm not ignoring you. I'm just waiting for it to come through. Thank you all so much. I see Nikki, thank you for joining. Thanks, Francisco, for joining. Thanks, Janice, for joining. Thanks, Piper, for joining. Thanks, Gaurav, for joining as well. I'll go ahead and close us out. Once again, you have resources for your updates in the chat. Remember to chime in with your member of Congress. Ooh, a question here. Someone says, can you say a little bit about the upcoming recess and what people can do? Of course. So, as some of you might know, in August, Congress, both the Senate and the House, both sides of Congress, tend to go back into their district. And so they leave DC and their working space here in DC and go home to their district, their hometown, their state, to do in-district work. And for many of them, that looks like different things. If it's an election year, in-district work consists of their campaign trail. If it's not an election here, they go home to rest for a bit. They go home to communicate with constituents, donors, etc. And so this is a good time for you to find out when your member will be in district, where they will be, where they're open to, where you can meet up with them and ask them questions. At AFSC, we do something called bird dogging, where you find out where your member of Congress will be, either at a town hall. As the COVID-19 pandemic is still ongoing, many members of Congress are doing virtual town halls. And so if you visit townhallproject.org, you can find out where your member of Congress might be hosting a physical and or virtual town hall. And we encourage you to show up and ask your member of Congress, are you committing to submitting a roadmap to citizenship for all 11 million undocumented immigrants in the upcoming legislative packages that will be moving? This is something our community wants and needs, and it's something we've been calling for decades now. We want to see that commitment from you. And so can you say on record that you will support that effort and that you will not vote for any legislation that has the potential of passing if it does not include clean and clear roadmaps to citizenship? And I say clean and clear roadmaps to citizenship is because oftentimes we find that when members of Congress try to put forward protections for certain categories of individuals, like we see with DACA, for example, they try to also increase enforcement activities on other undocumented immigrants, and they try to increase militarization of border communities, presence of ICE agents that we have known to abuse and tear community members apart from their loved ones. They try to increase their presence. And so we're saying we will not trade one group for the other. We are all part of this. Many are part of mixed status families. DACA recipients are children of TPS holders who are children of undocumented immigrants. We are so intertwined, and none of us are free until all of us are free and safe. And so please visit our website, afsc.org/bird-dogging, for more resources on how you can interact with your member of Congress this August recess. We also encourage you to find a local community organization that's working to support immigrants and see how you can support their efforts this recess. Either visitations, supporting immigrants who need resources to renew their DACA application so that they do not lapse out of protection and lose their work permits and their protection from detention and deportation. Those are other ways you can help as well. But it is very important that your member of Congress hears from you today, tomorrow, next tomorrow. You can tweet at them. You don't always have to call them. You can tweet at them. You can email them. You can message them on Facebook. You can go by the office and ask if their office is physically open, socially distanced and safe, of course. But there are many ways to interact with them, and there is no better time than now to exercise your rights as a constituent of this member of Congress. And I hope I answered that question well. Please let me know if you need any clarifying pieces. And I will just repeat the town hall website. 1 second. I'll try and get you the link so that you're able to access it. And it is townhallproject.com, and it should be in the chat shortly. Awesome. Thank you all so much. We are almost at time, and so I will just close this out. Please share this video on your page as well so that other community members and loved ones can read and stay up to date with information. And a reminder, every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, either me or my other fabulous colleagues will be here to share updates of our work, timely, pertinent information to help you with your social justice advocacy, and answer questions that you might be unclear about based on what you've seen in the media and more. Have a good rest of your day, y'all. Bye.